tomatoes are the most popular outdoor summer vegetables for people to grow in the UK. And that is a little bit surprising because they're not that easy to grow outdoors in the UK for a number of reasons. But seeing as most people don't have the luxury of an indoor growing space like a greenhouse or a polytunnel, it means that most people are just raw dogging them outside with no protection. And so I thought I would make this video to try to increase your chances of success if you're trying to do that yourself. The first thing would be to select a variety that's going to be good for outdoor growing. So it'll probably have some level of cold tolerance, but also will be an early cropping variety. That includes most cherry tomatoes because they're smaller, so they ripen faster. You can, seeing as you're raw dogging them, part of the pleasure for me in growing outdoor tomatoes in the UK is that level of gamble in that they taste just a bit sweeter, because if the risk has paid off and you just pulled them out just before they're about to get blight, then you feel like you had a bit of a better time. So it's generally a good idea to make sure that you go with a tried and tested outdoor grown variety for the UK. And I'll leave some stuff in the description so that you can decide on the varieties and maybe reduce that slight overwhelm, because there are thousands of varieties of tomatoes, significantly narrowed down by the ones that are likely to give you a crop outdoors in the UK summer. This one, Saint Pierre, I haven't tried outdoors before, and I wasn't actually intending to, but I didn't get a polytunnel up in time. And now this big one, I think I'm going to get it over the line, but I'm not sure if it succumbs to blight, because this plant is definitely affected by it. So the bigger varieties that take longer to ripen, even though I did have a few tomatoes off this plant in August, in about the beginning of August, I started to get the first few off it, you're less likely to get them over the line. And I'm on an allotment here, which means that they're much more likely to succumb to blight because it's an airborne disease and there's loads of other people growing potatoes and tomatoes on this site. So if one person manages to get it, it will get through the rest of the tomatoes on the site really, really quickly. So in your own back garden, you might not actually experience it, and you might get away with it most years. Don't be overly put off by that. And what you can do if you do get blight is to just remove any of the affected foliage, and that will slow it down. And you can look out for whether there's blight favourable conditions using the Hutton Blight Spy, which is for potato farmers. And I used that this year to calculate whether I could be bothered with keeping the tomatoes in the ground. So I got rid of any of the really badly affected plants, sorted out any of the unaffected fruit, and then I put some of the fruit that I thought wasn't affected into paper bags, and that's started to ripen now. But if you want to really choose which variety you're going to have, then I would suggest starting from seed. And if you're going to do that, you want to be doing that around March, April time. And you'll probably be best off doing that on a windowsill, because you're going to need a heated environment, because the plants just won't tolerate being really cold. So even if you've got a protected environment like a cold frame or a greenhouse, if it's unheated outside, it'll be too cold for them, potentially in March. Oh, hello. There's a wasp. Potentially March, April time, you're going to get nighttime temperatures often below freezing, and it will just kill your plants. The other thing is that they need heat in order to germinate. So they germinate pretty reliably in just any multi-purpose compost, but you will need to provide some sort of heat. So if you live in a warm house and you keep it pretty hot, like 20 degrees or whatever, then you're going to be absolutely fine. They'll just germinate. If you live in a house like mine and you're a bit brassic at times, and the nighttime temperatures get down to 8 degrees, then you might want to provide some sort of heat mat and some extra protection. Another thing for UK growers to consider, if you're growing tomatoes outside, is count the number of trusses. And I tend to just leave 3 on, which gives them a much better chance of ripening. And with these, because they've been affected by late blight, I've also just stripped off any of the small flowers at the ends of the truss, because it should help the plant to not distribute its energy across loads of fruit that it can never ripen. I'm don't know, what would you say? I'm backing the favourites in this race. So I'm really investing in those to hope that you get a little bit more time of good weather to just ripen those ones off. Because too many trusses is no good for any economy. And to be fair, I think that these tomato plants have probably got about as long as her prime ministership left. So yeah, avoid too many trusses, especially if you're growing outdoor tomatoes in the UK. And you can actually get some blight resistant varieties of seed. So you can consider whether you want to get those. Next year I'm planning to try out Primabella because it combines blight resistance but with actually a good tasting tomato. So that's the thing for me, that I've always been put off a lot of the blight resistant varieties like Crimson Crush and Crimson Blush. One, the seeds are really expensive, at about £5 for 5 or 10 seeds. But also, I've never heard of anybody raving about the taste of them. And if I want a tomato that tastes average, then I'll just go and buy one from the supermarket. If you've had some experience growing them, then let us know in the comments and tell me, are they worth growing or not? Seeing as you sow them in March and you're not necessarily harvesting them till August, September, that's an awfully long time to grow an average tasting fruit. So your tomatoes will either be called a bush variety or a cordon. And a cordon, or indeterminate one, is one that you tend to grow up a cane like this. Now, it's not quite as clear cut as that because you can grow some varieties as a bush or a cordon, and they'll all grow fairly bushy. It's just that this is a much neater way of growing an indeterminate variety tomato, and you can fit more of them into a small space if you grow them like this. If you want to learn how to prune tomatoes, go and Google or just search on YouTube how to prune an indeterminate or cordon variety tomato, and you'll find a demonstration for that. One of the things that I would advise against, which is quite commonly given out as advice on the internet, is to plant your tomato deep, which is, if I was going to be planting this one out, people often say take off these lower leaves and then bury it up to here. And now I would suggest that's actually a really bad idea if you're growing them, especially outdoors in the UK, and that's because we have a really short growing season. You've got in most parts of the UK, from about mid-May all the way till October, where the weather is favourable to actually have them outside. But the reason that people give for planting them deep is that tomatoes have the ability to form new roots from the stem. Often people say that it's these trichomes, these little hairs that are turning into roots. It's not that. It's just that there are different cells within the stem that are capable of forming roots. There are also cells in the plant that are capable of forming roots, and those are the root cells that it already has. So what you end up doing if you bury the plant is you delay the harvest because you've just stressed the plant into thinking that it needs to form new roots from the stem, but you've also potentially put your root ball into cold soil because you've dug a deeper hole for it. And so it slows the plant's growth down. You don't need to do that. You don't need to shorten the season in the UK any more than it's already shortened by the fact that it's not that warm here in the summer and we end up losing the plants to late blight. But essentially, don't bury the plant too deep because you're going to be slowing it down. If you want to know more about this, go to Ashley Gardening in Canada's channel, because she's also dealing with an environment where they have a short growing season and there is really no need to be able to delay that harvest more than you need to. If you are somebody who is in California or the Mediterranean, where you have a long growing season and hot, dry summers, then it might be a good idea to bury your plant deep, but it's not in the UK or Canada or anywhere where you have a short growing season. So I don't know whether you can see here, but that's like the early signs of it on the leaf. And you can pretty much de-leaf the entire plant if you have to. Clearly it's not preferable. And just by removing as much of that as possible and taking it away, you're lessening the chance of it either getting to the rest of the plant, but also infecting all of the rest of the ones that are here by spreading the spores all around. I mean, they're already infected. I'm just trying my best to slow it down to get the fruit over the line. Otherwise, I would not be wanting to strip all of those leaves off. A Patio variety, which are like little bushy plants that are just designed for if you have a small space, like Tumbling Tom, and you can save the seeds from those as well, and they'll grow true to type. They're a good option if you've got a limited space, like if you're a balcony gardener and you just want to grow some in a pot. They ripen pretty early and they're tried and tested outdoors in the UK, so well worth a go because you're likely to get a decent harvest off them. We don't always get favourable conditions, and that's why next year one of the varieties I'm going to grow, because apparently it's good for, rather than just a hot girl summer, is outdoor girl. Because like this summer, I don't know what you call this weather, a WAP summer, it needs slightly different treatment than just a hot girl summer variety tomato, because you just can't rely on it being a hot girl summer, not every year in the UK anyway. This is the one that I'm really holding out hope for, because yeah, I need one, just one massive tomato to get ripe, having been outdoors, growing in the soil. Because the taste, well, I say one, I've already had some, but I want a big one. I've had some smaller ones off this plant, like I said, in mid-August, and then the rest of them were falling way behind in terms of ripening. Just want one. Just that one experience of it dripping down my chin and me looking like a tomato vampire. I'll keep you updated. Do it however you want to. There's no method that's cheating. If you buy the plants that are young, you don't have to start them from seed. It's just useful because you can then choose your varieties in a bit more detail. But there's loads of ways of getting hold of plants. If you haven't made the decision to sow them by March or April, and you've decided in June that you want to grow them, then just go out to the garden centre and buy some, or contact some gardener friends who maybe have some tomato cuttings that they can give you to grow on, or they might even have a load of spare seedlings because they oversowed in order to make sure that they had the number that they wanted. Gardeners are generally quite generous, and it doesn't have to be a lonely activity. It's a lot easier if you've got some friends who are pretty good at it because you can help each other out. So yeah, you probably figured out by this point, they are a reasonable amount of effort, and it can be pretty devastating if you lose your crop having looked after it for months. But the question that I think is important is it worth it? Is it worth sowing those seeds early in the year on the windowsill, cluttering up your house? Is it worth then potting on those seedlings and trying to get them to a decent size so by the time it's June you can plant them outside, and then hardening them off at the end of May, taking them in and out of the house in order to accustom them to outside conditions, and then hoping that they fruit just before they get blight? Well, that's for you to decide whether you want to do that. And obviously you can make things considerably easier by getting an indoor growing space. But for me, just handling tomatoes, seeing them coming on, and then the payoff of getting your first fruit that you can eat straight off the plant as you're harvesting them outside in the golden evening sunlight hours, that is a pleasure that I think is just worth an enormous amount of effort. And so I get hooked in every single year into trying to do it. Some years I do it and some years I fail, but you make the decision whether it's worth it for you.